season and the 200 meters. And how I've broken this down is I'm going to talk about the indoor season and an approach that we take basically indoors. It's not going to be a real technical presentation, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you might have, and we'll have opportunity and time to do that. But it's more about just how I approach from the beginning of the indoor season towards the end of championship time indoors, how it is that we try to progressively prepare them for this race. And in doing so, of course, indoors, you know all of the different, I'm going to talk about the different variables that we run into indoors that makes things a little more complicated maybe than what they might be for most of us outdoors. So you're going to hear me talk about some indoor technique items and things that we try to implement. I'm also going to talk about some training points I think that are critical that you might want to incorporate in to training sessions related to the 200 meters and indoors. And we're also going to talk a little bit about outdoor technique, and strategies, you might say, in the outdoor 200-meter race, as well as some training points for the outdoor season. So that's kind of how this is organized and how I'll present. What I want to do is I'm going to go through the 200 meters indoors and discuss some things about it, and then when I finish that, while it's fresh on your mind, if you have questions, then you can ask questions of me about anything you want, but try to keep it to the 200-meter indoors, and if you would, please come to the microphone when you ask the question so that everybody can clearly hear what your question is, and then we'll go do a few things, talk about outdoors, and then we'll conclude with some questions about the outdoors at that time. The uniqueness of the 200 meters indoors. First of all, just let me say that, when you run the 200 meters indoors, it's not, while not all outdoor tracks are exactly the same, the one thing we do know is they're a lot more similar to one another than when you run indoors in the 200 meters. All of the various different tracks that you might end up having to run on. I want to talk about the different kind of forces, that occur indoors. And of course, this can be taken to all different levels because you have indoor bank tracks, you're going to have indoor flat tracks, you're going to have indoor tracks that are flat that have X amount of radius, you're going to have indoor tracks, they're bank tracks that have a certain radius, you're going to have some indoor tracks that are banked that have different width lanes, and all of that plays into I think the approach that you have to take in trying to prepare. And of course, we all know that lanes can make a difference too, and you have to, I think, address that in your training program and in preparation for any kind of championship event for an athlete, that they have to be prepared to run in any of the lanes, because you don't earn your lane until you get into the final. In the preliminary round, you're going to get randomly assigned to it. So, lane draws and how important that can be. I learned a lesson about lane draws not really that long ago. When you've been coaching as long as I have, I guess 10 years, not that long ago, but in the 2004 Olympic Games, we had an athlete at LSU. His name was Benny Brazil. And Benny Brazil was a very good 400 hurdler from Houston, Texas, and he had run for us and was quite successful. He's also a football player, but he ran the 400 hurdles, and in high school he was very good, so he was always getting preferred lanes throughout his career. He got into college, and he was always getting preferred lanes throughout his career. He made the Olympic team. It was the first time that Benny ever ran the 400 hurdles in lane 8 was in the finals at the Olympic Games. We never really ran him in lane 8 in practice. He never ever drew lane 8 in running in any of the competitions that we had. And so if you can only imagine, going into the biggest race of your career, so to speak, and maybe your lifetime, and experiencing it for the very first time ever. So as a result of that, obviously, I'm much more conscious about training and preparing athletes, because on some of these 60-degree bank tracks that you run on, if an athlete hasn't had the experience of running or training 6, and then all of a sudden it happens in the event that maybe it counts the very most, you're going to have a hard time convincing them that you've got them prepared to be at their very best when they've never ever run in that lane before. So that's the significance in the story that I can give you really about lane draws. The types of centripetal forces that are much greater obviously indoors than are outdoors, and the lane draws, even different kind of forces are going to be generated. So as we move forward and I talk a little bit about maybe block setting and talk a little bit about acceleration and break down this indoor race into pieces like what we do in preparation for competition, and then how maybe I try to sequence and apply the application, I guess, of what we're trying to teach and the strategies that we use throughout the season, from one race to another race to another race. It is indoors. It's a competition, or it's an event that during competition, traditionally throughout the majority of the meets that we participate in, you're only going to run one round. So you go to a meet and you run and you get a chance. Now, I will give you this information. We don't have a bank track indoors at Louisiana State University. Currently, we don't have a track indoors. It's being renovated, but it's still going to be a flat track. We don't have a bank track. And so one of the things that we always try to do as we're going throughout our season is we'll go to a competition where there's a bank track, and we try to get there and have made arrangements in advance to where the day before we can practice on that track. And one of the things that we do in that training session is we spend most of our time in that training session the day before, where they're actually running the first turn and the second turn on these bank tracks in lanes 3 through 6. In other words, each individual is going to get the blocks in lane 3 if we can. Individuals probably going to get a block start in lane 4, one in lane 5, and also in lane 6. In some cases then, as we go on throughout the year, the individual athletes kind of indicate what their biggest fear is, and oftentimes it's lane 6, drawing lane 6. So we'll spend a little bit more time with that athlete and try to get them a little bit more into a comfort zone of being able to start up in lane 6. So we're going to, as we move through, we'll talk a little bit about that. Also, the banked versus the unbanked, I've kind of discussed that a little bit. Obviously, the forces that are generated on the first turn and on the second turn, if you ever had a really elite athlete, particularly male athlete, running the 200 meters, because my coaching experience goes back before the bank track, and the challenges that are created, particularly for the really pretty good sized men, tall men, going into the second turn on a track that is not banked and flat, and it's 200 meters. It's a significant challenge, and many of you in the room also can probably remember back in the day when we were actually trying to run some of these races on the 160-yard indoor bank wood tracks too, so where you try to run a 300 yards and that sort of thing. So all of these challenges that are created as a result of the different types of facilities that you run on, I think it's really important that a person throughout and in developing their training and then in their competitions, that they try to cover all of the bases with their athletes so that they can at least be in their comfort zone when they're thrust into that kind of competitive environment on one of those types of facilities. Visual pictures of what the facility's like prior to going there. Rehearsing the best you can, or doing some type of race modeling and training, even if it's on an outdoor track. Part of I think the visualization and seeing, like for example, this year our NCAA championship is going to be in New Mexico in Albuquerque, and our student athletes on our current team have never run at Albuquerque. So certainly on our regular season schedule, Albuquerque's on it for that reason, so that they can go out and visually see it and experience it. But prior to that, with the athletes, we'll be spending some time with pictures showing them, hey, this is what the facility's like, this is, and doing some comparisons so that hopefully when we go there, the one time prior to the NCAA championship, that they'll have, and this is critically important, because when we go to a meet like that, where the NCAA championship's going to be, the purpose of going there is for them to leave there and be really confident about their experience on that facility. So it's detailed preparation and having them ready and know what to expect when you get there, so that it's a real positive experience for them is critically important. Because the last thing you want to do is have a really negative experience, and then knowing that the next time you're coming back there, you're going to be dealing with an athlete that's not got the confidence level that they might need. We also know that bank versus bank is an issue, in our experience anyway. Not all the bank tracks are created equal. A lot of them are really significantly different in the way that they're constructed. And the one thing I can tell you is that the really elite athletes can feel the difference, okay? The really elite athletes can feel the difference between one bank track and another bank track. Examples I could give might be running on, and I'm not being critical of any of these facilities, I'm just only pointing out the differences. If you run at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, that's a totally different bank track feel from running at the University of Arkansas. Running at the University of Arkansas, from our experience, is really significantly different than running at Texas A&M, particularly in this event. That's not from my running experience on those facilities, but that is definitely the feedback that I get from our athletes who have competed on those facilities. So, it's been a while, but I'm sure Albuquerque, for various different reasons, is going to feel a little different to them also. An example I would give in going to Albuquerque early in the season, there's always that fear of the altitude, and what effect that can have upon them. So my approach in going to an early season meet in Albuquerque in this event also, even though from a physiological standpoint it's really not supposed to be that much different in 200 meters, is our race distribution or our race plan going to that facility is going to be a race plan that I'm assured they're going to finish strong and feel really good. It's not going to be a race plan where I'm going to challenge them in the first half of the race to where at the end of the race they're not going to feel very good about how they finished. That would be not a good race plan. So we're constantly trying to target and get them ready for, as I say, the meet that's going to count the most for them, and the meet that counts the most for us is the NCAA championship meet. So we're targeting ourselves for that. So the kind of performance or the time that they have in early season is, to me, less important than them taking the race plan and being able to think and effectively implement that race plan and walk away from that race with the feeling that you wanted them to feel when you went to that meet. So that's kind of the goal and kind of the objective of what we're trying to accomplish. Continuing on, I really break down, and this is what really I think makes the 200 meters indoors a totally different race from the 200 meter outdoors, from the standpoint of trying to teach how it is that you want them. Indoors, I find that and you probably find too, that the race is actually broken down in segments just based on how the track's constructed. You've got your approximately 50 meters, depending upon what lane you have, for the first turn. Then you have the straightaway, then you have another turn, and then you have another straightaway in the finish. Where outdoors, race distribution, I think outdoors becomes much more complicated for the athletes. Indoors, I think the race distribution is really controlled just simply by how the race is broken down because of the construction of the track. And I'll kind of walk through the approach early season that I would take, and then middle season, and then late season, what we're trying to accomplish with these 450 meter segments. You notice I put constant shifting there because indoors there's constant shifting that goes on, throughout the race. They have to understand, and that's something certainly that you have to address, and something that you're going to try to implement in one way or another into your training program, so that they understand once you get there what it is that you're wanting them to try to do. Indoors, and this may be a very general statement, but through my experience with running the 200 meters indoors versus running the 200 meter outdoors, there's going to be more total steps in the race indoors than what there's going to be outdoors, meaning that there's going to be more frequency. A lot of that is because of the emphasis that maybe we're putting upon the athlete on the uphill, on the downhill, on the bank tracks. But I can tell you that there is a difference. Last year, Kim Duncan ran 99 steps indoors when she ran 22:54 at an indoor competition. So 99 steps is what it took, and as you'll see, I have a little video clip here from I think it's SEC indoor or something, where she ran, and we'll watch it a couple times. But if you really watch it, Kim was a very efficient sprinter at maximum velocity. How many people were listening to Vince a little bit ago? Can you raise your hand? You know, Vince talking about the post and talking about pushing, and how at maximum velocity the push is all vertical and so forth. I think Kim is an excellent demonstrator of exactly what he's talking about, because Kim is maybe not a very eloquent accelerator, to say the least. I mean, she does okay, don't get me wrong, but she's not one of the greatest accelerators in the world. But at maximum velocity mechanics, she is extremely efficient, and that's going to be noted as I go through, particularly when we get outdoors, because I like to, on race distribution, I like to calculate and like to measure, well, what did the individual run the first 100 meters of the race, and then what did they run the second 100 meters of the race, and compare those two things. And most times what you'll find is they're, and I'll speak first of women, they're generally oftentimes going to be fairly equal. And that's not what you want. What you want, obviously, is the second 100 meters to be faster, because they're not accelerating, they're already at maximum velocity. So there's an enormous amount of deceleration that took place. So what we're trying to do is get to where there's at least a half a second differentiation between the first 100 and the second 100 meters. That gets really hard to measure indoors, though, because most indoor tracks in every lane don't have a mark that you can pick up on to get those kind of splits. But certainly outdoors, that's what you're looking to try to do. So in this case, Kim was at about 99 steps indoors. And then when she ran the 2180 at the USA Championships outdoors, she ran that race in 95 steps. Well, when you consider the distance being covered in each stride, you know, that's a pretty significant difference. Somewhere along the line, she made up a lot more. But a lot of that, once again, goes to, I think, the way that you might approach and teach the 200 meters to be run indoors. I know I certainly put a lot more emphasis and a lot more conscience, I guess, consciously address the fact that because of the uphill and the downhill, it's so extremely important that you keep your feet underneath you and not let them get out in front of you. As we'll go a little farther, and you'll see in that second turn coming down the hill, you can really get yourself into some significant trouble if you're not keeping your feet well underneath your center of mass. So that just gives you a kind of an idea of already you're starting to pick up on a few differences that take place indoors versus outdoors. I haven't done extensive research on this kind of thing, but I'm sure that it's probably true in many cases. The reason that it happens Maybe it's earlier in the annual training plan, and that's why it's happening. But certainly I think we would all agree that outdoors, your ability to really push and open up the push and push hard outdoors, you have that opportunity to do it for more strides than what you do indoors, just because of the force, the application of force in the direction to keep yourself in your lane as you go around the bend. Indoor 200 meters technique acceleration. You know, there's not really much different about acceleration. Acceleration, and you heard Vince, those of you who were in there heard Vince talk, I mean, it's the same no matter what you're running. It's whether it's, and we teach the same way, whether it's 100 meters, 200 meters, the 400 meters, in some aspects, but not in all aspects, in the 100-meter hurdles and the 110 hurdles, you're going to see us teaching all of the athletes the same method of acceleration, so to speak. So it's not really going to be significantly different. But I will tell you this, that I've been to indoor meets before where, you know, let's talk just briefly about maybe block setting, for example, and in dealing with the blocks and how to set the blocks indoors. I think that, quite honestly, a lot of it depends upon what kind of track that you're running on. But I will tell you that through my experience, I've seen people angle the blocks on a bank track, leave the blocks directly in the middle on an indoor track. I've even seen, to a degree, and have done it myself actually, where an athlete can't steer themselves correctly through the first turn and trying to even move the blocks higher up in the lane. So there's a lot of different things you can do that I think you just have to apply it to each individual athlete. But the one thing that you have to understand is that the way at which they accelerate doesn't change. You're only trying to change the direction maybe at which they're accelerating to keep them more comfortable with running in the lane. One of the most all of the disqualifications that take place indoors in the 200 meters are taking place either on the coming down the hill on the first turn, or somewhere from the midpoint to the end point of the second turn. So those are areas at which I think you have to place special emphasis upon, so that they're somewhat through their peripheral, they're aware of where they're steering themselves, because we all know, and you'll see there, and many of you have seen, the NCAA champion in an event in the indoor 200 has been determined by more by people making mistakes on the 200-meter run indoors than by somebody running the perfect race. You know, in other words, somebody should have won that didn't because of something that happened in one of those two spots on the turn. For example, you feel like you're getting too close to the line, and so you're having to compensate. So your focus goes totally away from exactly what you're supposed to be doing in accelerating, and that's getting that good hard push and pushing through the post, as Vince said, to where you can continue to accelerate in the right direction and continue to accelerate in an efficient manner. So, you know, basically, you know, this is probably, I think, the most important. I'm going to show you two different races in a little bit where the athlete in lane 5 won the race the first 50 meters because of how much better they accelerated in that race. It didn't mean that they were better accelerators overall than maybe somebody else that was in the race. It just in that particular championship race, they accelerated better than the person that was next to them who was also contending for that. The importance of creating force, and certainly, you know, it's extremely important that kids understand, you know, all the way from the block settings and how it is that they can generate force into the ground, because that push, as Vince said, pushing is so critically important as they're going through the acceleration. Now, there's a lot of different ways to communicate with your athletes about what it is that you're trying to get done. not every coach has the exact same approach in trying to teach things, all right? So I think what you have to do is figure out what you're most comfortable with in talking to the athletes. The one thing I do know is that at the end of the day, you're going to, you know, from acceleration through the 100 meters, you're striving to get everybody to do the same thing. Now, and I know Vince takes a holistic approach into teaching it, and certainly I would agree, but I think that whatever approach you take in trying to teach it is entirely up to you. I think there's many different ways things can be communicated to athletes and create great success. You just have to understand what it is that you're most comfortable with and how it is that you present it. So I'm going to go through a couple things that I try to do in working on acceleration. Now, the thing about it is acceleration starts the second that you get into the blocks. You're starting to deal with the acceleration. And block setting, I can just tell you that in indoors, we're trying to set the blocks at least in the middle, or maybe a little bit more up from the middle in the lane, and we have them pointed in a straight direction as the curve. We're not angling the blocks in any way. We typically will ask the athlete to have the front pad set at around 45 degrees and the back pad set at 55 degrees as they're doing their block starts. Another tip, we started every practice early in the fall when we get the blocks out. We'll start to teach, you know, block settings for each individual, which they really don't vary that much. A starting point is maybe 2, and then 2 steps from the line, and then 3.5 steps from the line. We teach an extremely aggressive push with both feet coming off of the pads and the shoulder alignment in the set position over the hands, much like Vince had talked about. None of that changes. So it should be the same. Everybody should probably be teaching the same thing. In some instances where we have athletes that don't feel that they're getting an adequate push maybe off of the back foot, back pad, we might separate the blocks just a little bit more. We may put the shoulders back behind the hands just a little bit and maybe bend the elbows just slightly so that they can really push back and lock or load up those ankle joints so that they can really explode out and push off the boat. It's one way or the other is critically important in the early stages that you get them to understand how important it is that they do that kind of pushing as they come out of the block. We put great emphasis upon big arm separation as you exit the blocks, big arm separation. Typically, I'll probably put initially a mark out in front of the blocks, a chalk mark or something on the track. I think that has helped me to engage them in where it is and how big of an explosive movement that I want them to generate on the start. So typically I'll have a mark there for them to try to put their foot down as we're teaching it initially on acceleration. But of course, you know, you have to push through the post as in a nice straight angle to get the most benefit from the force application as you exit the blocks. So in doing so then, as that back foot begins to exit the block pad after you've pushed with the back foot, we put a great deal of emphasis upon low, extremely low heel recovery. And in some instances, while I wouldn't advocate teaching it this way, but in some instances actually trying to get them to drag their toe. Now, the purpose of that is, you know, when you're at zero velocity and not moving at all, the quickest way to get from point A to point B is in a straight line, not in a half circle. So now, the strength of the athlete and their ability to achieve this movement, they have to have the strength levels to be able to do it, but it's a technique that we try to teach. So low heel recovery is something that we put tremendous emphasis upon. I don't have the video here, but I have some video where At one time, I took of two of our hurdlers that were hurdling against one another that had similar 100 meters speed. And in getting to the first hurdle, one had this huge problem of real high heel recovery from the point of exit of the blocks, where the other one had, really good technique at low heel recovery. And those are really the only differences between the two people. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the athlete that had the low heel recovery was over a half stride ahead of the other person. So it really genuinely makes a significant difference in the acceleration, particularly through the first 4 or 5 steps. And then, of course, and I know Vince had made a point of this too, the higher the force that the individual is able to generate, then the longer the acceleration pattern in pushing the body into that upright, tall posture is going to take longer the harder you push. So, I would also agree that as you're doing any kind of running or any kind of drills, it's important for you to put that special emphasis to the athletes of not mindlessly doing things, but constantly really be thinking about, even on warm-up exercise, accelerations, and that sort of thing, that they're applying a lot of these same kind of concepts. And I think that obviously I don't want to go into teaching acceleration mechanics, but the reality of it is that there are definitely things that you can do, and a lot of literature out there that I think is very good to help you to understand the importance of it. Countering forces, particularly during the indoor, the force application and countering and so forth, because of the curve and the things that you're having to accomplish as you leave the blocks, you're immediately going into the turn. So, and it's obviously it's a pretty stiff curve form. So we're going to show you a likeness to what it's like here in a few minutes. Lean occurs from the ankles. I think it's something that's really important. So obviously, if that's the case in running the 200 meters around at the start on a bank track, I think you have to pay special attention in your strength and training program to address these kind of stressors that they're going to have as they're training and they're trying to run these kind of turns. So the hips must stay perpendicular to the center. The bottom line is basically what I'm saying is they're not trying to turn the hips, okay? They're trying to keep the hips perpendicular and the shoulders really perpendicular to the lane in which they're running in. As you can see here, I think it is, so it's very similar to a high jump curve approach. And this is an example. This is some video of Coach Todd Lane's, one of his high jumpers, on their high jump approach in practice. And then when I show you in relationship to that 200 meters as they're coming around the bend there, you see the angle. Kim is in lane 5 there, and it's easy to see because her foot's down and she's getting ready to go into hip extension, and you can see the direction that the force is being applied. You can see the angle at which she's leaning, and if you go back and you look at the high jumper, there's really not much difference, is there, in what you're doing there. So it just gives you a good idea. I know we always think about those kind of forces that a high jumper is generating as they're running around the bend, and oftentimes you might not think that it's similar to running the 200 meters indoors on a bank track. So there's some pretty significant forces that you're having to deal with there as a sprinter that you only have to deal with when you're running the 200 meters indoors or possibly the 400 meters indoors also. Let's talk a little bit about the first 50 meters and a kind of approach to take to it. So in doing so, we put great emphasis on accelerating aggressively out of the blocks. Anytime we get in the blocks, it doesn't matter. The blocks are typically not brought out and thrown down on the track until we get into November and we start teaching what we're doing. A lot of that has to do with the collegiate calendars and the way it's set up. That's what works for us. But when the blocks do come out, that's a signal to them of one thing about what's fixing to start happening in training. And then another thing takes place a few weeks later when you have the blocks out and then they see you bring a gun out to practice. That also is a signal that you're notching it up level. So, you know, you kind of systematically move them into these kind of positions obviously try early to create a good teaching environment. Then as that teaching environment about what you're wanting to get done gradually becomes into more of a competitive situation in training. And then, of course, that carries over to competitive situations as you get into competition. Because, and the amount of emphasis that you put, once again, on really good, focused sprint training and accelerating training is important. You can't allow them, or you shouldn't be allowing them to go out and do anything mindlessly. So you have to keep an eye on them, and if you can tell they're not thinking about what they're doing, then it's time to remind them because you know, when you only have the opportunity to do X number of repetitions in a training session, obviously you need every one of them to be of high quality in nature. So you have to really challenge the athlete. So accelerate aggressively out of the blocks. I always felt like in 200 meters, the first 4, 5, or 6 seconds of that race, the athlete is really operating off of free energy that's stored in the muscle cells, okay? So I always feel like the farther you can travel in that amount of time, the less you have to travel when your energy system starts producing and changing and starting to produce lactate. So you establish a counter to the force, in other words, the lean, just like what I showed with Kim and the other runner there in that first turn, the kind of lean that you have to have. And quite honestly, it really pretty much naturally happens. What you don't want to happen is you know, see shoulders turn, see the hips try to turn as you go around. That force is it's going to create very poor force into the track for good maximum velocity sprint mechanics. On the first turn, of course, you know, they're going to, if you talk to the athlete about how they feel, particularly when they get on it at first, you know, they're going to, you can use all different kind of descriptors or words that you want to use, but we talk a little bit to them about trying to feel that whip as you come off and start the downhill run. And the reason that we do talk a little bit about that with them is we put a great deal of emphasis because at that point you're to 40 to 50 meters, about how important it is that you go from that really extremely aggressive, okay, pushing to continue to push, but you've got to be able to then start reducing muscle tension or relaxing when you're sprinting, okay? And, you know, so you have to let the whip work for you. Don't fight it, I guess, is the point that I'm trying to make. So often when an athlete starts that downhill, if you haven't talked to them about it, if they haven't felt the sensation, and certainly have to talk to them about how it feels, and you want to get that feedback of the, wow, it felt really easy to me. If going down the hill doesn't feel easy, then they're not doing the right things. Okay, so you're trying to let the track work for you, not you work against the track. And that's where oftentimes, as you go on, and I'm going to use words that Vince doesn't, okay, but the drive, the transition, and then, you know, the maximum velocity sprint mechanics, but oftentimes they're experiencing this at a time of transition, so to speak. In other words, when in my teaching, where the push is becoming more and more vertical then, okay, more and more vertical, and they have to be able to feel that. Now, when you're doing the vertical pushing, that means that the vertical pushing has to take place under your center of mass, not out in front of your center of mass, because that's when they really get in trouble. Because once the foot starts getting at all on those downhills, especially on the 60-degree bank tracks in lane 5 and 6, you're going to get yourself in real trouble real fast. You're going to create a lot of muscle tension in the quads and so forth that is going to hinder you as you go from the first 50 to the second 50 to the third 50, and you're really going to be feeling it the fourth 50 if you don't let the track work for you. So I think that these are the kinds of things that you have to get feedback from them about how they're feeling as they're going downhill. So typically Friday, I mentioned, we go to the track, the athletes are doing their downhill, or they're doing their first 50 meters out of the blocks after they've gone through the warm-up and so forth. You know, you just kind of stand in a place where after they come back, and I've seen Mike do it, I've seen a lot of people do it, you know, the athlete walks back and you kind of, well, how did that feel, you know, to you? You know, and you get that ugly look, and you know, right then, it didn't feel good. So then you got to kind of start talking to them, and on the next one, you want them to try something a little different, and so forth. And that's really, really good to try to utilize those teaching opportunities, and that goes back to just helping them to gain confidence. So whether it's wit or however you want to describe it, you know, it's supposed to be a fun thing, you know, where it really feels good coming down that bank. And they're not afraid of coming down the bank, and that it feels relatively easy to them. So feel the downhill and run off of the curve. So, you know, when you get off of the curve, then we finish basically, you know, the first 50 meters of the race. And then what that's going to do is put us into a little different mind think then for the next segment of the race, which is the backstretch 50 meters that goes after that. So let's talk a little bit about that part of the race here, and the kind of communication that goes on with the athlete and the kind of things that you're trying to do. You're really in maximum velocity mechanics at that point, really in high gear. So if you're running correctly, they're really going to be posted up. You're going to see everything going vertically. You're going to notice that the foot placement is really as they're striking the ground, trying to put their foot through the track, however you want to describe it, that's going to be happening right underneath them, not as what Vince was talking about casting out in front. Everybody casts, but it's not something you have to teach. It just naturally happens when you've got good maximum velocity sprint mechanics. So I'll go through a couple things that we do to try to teach it. So as you enter into the curve, that's when it's similar to, you know, a race car driver, where you kind of got to shift down, you know, as you finish and you're going into that third 50 meters then. So now, as I mentioned before, you know, early in the season, this is what I try to do, and it's very individualized depending upon what the athlete, maybe their experience, or maybe how fit I think they are, or how prepared we have them to run the race. Every race I have them run indoors in the 200, I try to give them an individual race plan in their mind about, and I'll give them a point on the track. Okay, I want you to do this, then I want you to really relax, maintain your velocity, but really relax, should have a little smile on your face maybe. You come around, and then I want you to come down off the turn, and I don't want you to really try to go hard until you're at this point. We're 30 meters from the finish line or something, okay? That might be race number 1 of the end of the season. And then you get feedback from them about how they felt about that. Oh, it really felt good. I really felt, you know, great, strong in the finish. Isn't that what you want to hear? That's what you're trying to get them to feel, confident. Hey, I'm in really good shape. What you don't want them telling is, oh, if I just go out a lot harder, if I ran a whole lot harder, I'd run a lot faster. No, if you run harder, you're probably going to run slower. So you try to get them in that relaxed mind about running the race, and then the next time you go that Friday practice, or if you happen to have a bank track and you're practicing it, you pick a spot out and you say, okay, this time now, you know, I want you to run the race the same way that you did over the first 3 segments, the first 3 50s. But now, when you come down off of the turn, this time, I want you to go ahead and notch it up and really push hard vertically, and let's really push hard all the way to the finish line. And meaning that you're going to put a lot more emphasis and a lot more energy into the last part of the race. Typically, if you just don't do that, you know, if you signal a place on the track that you want them to do that. I did this with Kim Duncan throughout her whole career, and everybody I've ever coached at 200 indoors, I tell them where it is I want them to go from. Some people it never gets but 30 meters away, you know, because they just aren't mechanically efficient enough to move farther back the track to still be able to finish strong and feel strong about their finish. So As we go throughout the indoor season, then, what we're going to do is we're just going to keep pushing it back farther and farther and farther. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the 200 meters becomes a race where there's really some relaxation that takes place in the middle 60 to 70 meters, and the rest of it, man, we're hammering it as hard as we can in pushing vertically to continue that good sprint mechanics. We also put that emphasis. Now, this is critical to understand, too, is that as we go uphill, we try to increase the frequency, but we try to do it in a relaxed mode, okay? In other words, we're not going to strain to try to increase the frequency. We're going to increase the frequency as much as we can while maintaining good relaxation. By asking them to increase the frequency up the hill, you're much more likely to keep the foot well underneath them, which is a lot more efficient way of attacking the hill, obviously, than if you're overstriding. So then when we go into the third 50 meters, I've already covered the first 25 meters of the curve. We've already asked them to kind of increase the frequency. You know, as they went up the hill, and you kind of increase the frequency, but you got to stay relaxed while you're doing it now. That's critically important that they understand how relaxed they have to be. And then, of course, it almost looks like sometimes almost like a shuffle, to be honest with you. The last 50 meters, of course, we've addressed it some. You come down off the second curve. You've given them instruction on where it is that you want them to really start pushing hard vertically, wherever that may be. With Kim, it gets all the way back into the middle of the curve, you know, and then we're really going to hammer it from that point forward. So that relaxation takes place for just about that 80 meters. And the emphasis put on re-accelerating, which the way you emphasize the re-accelerating is the vertical push. So that's what we're trying to do. So apply those forces aggressively into the ground. It's also coming down off of that second turn, you know, once again, you see more people lose focus on their mechanics. And when they lose focus on their mechanics, then they get 2 steps on the line or 1 step on the white line, they get disqualified. So they have to be cognizant and aware at all times. This is a race that obviously takes a great deal of concentration and good balance and focus as you go throughout the entire journey around the track. Keep the lean away, shoulders over the hips on the downhill run. This is, can you all see that very well, I hope? And I'll try to figure out how to play it here. This is 200 meters indoors. Lane 5 is Kim, and give you a chance to... When you hear that, oh, at the end, that's a good sign. But that gives you an idea, and I know we're kind of pressed for time. That gives you an idea, you know, and if you, you know, that was late in the season, and you saw just how aggressively she was attacking that race. Really, from the beginning all the way to the end, there was some relaxation that took place on the backstretch. This is a male athlete, and the other thing I want to point out to you is that you notice, too, the race was decided in the first 50 meters. That's how important that acceleration is. You're going to see the same thing, I think, hold true in this race. Oops. In this race, if I can cue it up here. There we go. Same thing. You're in earnest in lane 5. The race is going to be won in the first 50 meters. His ability to maintain that relaxation and really get good maximum velocity mechanics towards the end is the difference overall in the race. And there's the O again, and that's good news. So that kind of gives you a good idea, I think, of what we're talking about. I'm going to move forward now. Starts on the curve are important. I talked about how we do that when we go using the different lanes. I talked a little bit about block settings. Let's talk about in and outs. When we talk about shifting gears and so forth, I think it's important for you to understand that when we do our in and outs, those are segmented runs where they're going to run really hard for 15 meters, maintain that velocity for another 15, then really go hard for the next 15. So those are the kind of runs we're talking about. I'm going to kind of rush through. We're running out of time. Focus on reshifting. That's how we teach that for the indoors. The reshifting is using some in and out. Speed endurance work's obviously important too. Let me go ahead and then we'll have questions right here at the end on both. The outdoor 200 meters, obviously the forces are not the same as the outdoor. This is a much harder event to teach for me personally than the indoors because the race distribution aspect of it oftentimes is really difficult for athletes to learn. Take like a Muna Lee, for example, when she was at LSU, all 4 years that she was running collegiately, she would always run the first 100 too fast and therefore was never able to run the second 100 as fast. In other words, her race distribution was wrong. And it wasn't until she got locked into lane 1 and in Olympic trials where I said, listen, you're going to have to kind of go out easy on the turn, then you're going to have to hammer it on the straightaway. And she ran her personal best and made the Olympic team because she distributed the race better. So that's how much difference race distribution. So always time the first 100, time the second 100, and go over and see what it is. 3/10 on the women, pretty good. 5/10, excellent. When Kim ran the 2180, it was 7/10 difference, okay? Just to give you an idea, because it was like 11.3 and came back in 10.5. Lane draws, we talked about how important that is. Whip off of the curve, same thing, only a little different, you know, outdoors than indoors. So as far as race distribution, we try to teach it a little differently outdoors. You can have 80 meters of really concentrated, long, we might say drive phase, whatever you want to call it. The bottom line is that there's been some pretty hard pushing going on so that we can extend the acceleration phase over a much longer distance because we can. It's not broken up outdoors like it is indoors, giving that full effort the remainder of the race. Much like indoors, outdoors, the first outdoor race, I'll have them target a certain place on the track where I really want them to go hard so that they finish strong and gain confidence and move forward from there. 100-meter split difference, somewhere around a half a second, as I said earlier. Then starts for 80 meters, doing some speed endurance work, 90s or 120s, 150s, you know, with full recovery. Also some broken speed endurance runs where we run maybe 150 at 95, rest a minute, and then run 80 meters and trying to really get them to push vertically on that 80-meter run. This is the last slide that we have, and I think this is the, somebody can count fast and count the strides, but Kim's, I think, in lane 6.
And there's the gun in this 200 final. And Duncan gets away well, Phoenix goes with her, and Tarmo as well. They head down the back straightaway. And it is Allison Felix that urges to the lead. Allison Felix there. Duncan now gaining, and on her inside Tarmo. And here's Duncan. And Duncan alongside Felix and edges ahead as they come to the line.
So that was one of the best race distributed races that she ran. Keep in mind that the straightaway there was a little wind aid, so that kind of made a difference too. Questions? Anybody have any questions? It is. It's just the ability to distribute the race. I think your race distribution is oftentimes related to your fitness level. And obviously Allison at that point wasn't at the fitness level that Kim was. And so Allison probably would have run faster in that race had she not gone out so hard where she was ahead at the beginning of the race. So Kim did an excellent job of distributing in that competition. And that's the other thing, not panicking or creating a lot of muscle tension as a result of not being in front, too. I think that's a key element also. Anybody else have any other questions? Yes. Talk loud, Mike, so they can hear, since you're too lazy to get up to the microphone. You'll bring it to him. All right, here we go.
Now, coaching indoor, how would you change from lane 5 to lane 6? If, say, if Kim had lane 6 at the national championship compared to lane 5?
Well, we really wouldn't change that much because we would have really trained in that lane. I think when you're out in lane 6 though, and I'll be honest with you, most of we'll certainly have more starts out of lane 6 in our training sessions than any other lane, all right, first of all, particularly for somebody that I feel like might get stuck out there, because just the way we see things at the NCAA level, you can very easily end up in 5 or 6 if you're running it at a high level. You just never know after those prelims, you may come up 100 short and all of a sudden you're in 6 instead of 5. So I don't think we'd make really any real significant changes, but it sure is nice to earn lane 5. It eases some muscle tension and makes the coach feel a lot better. Any other questions at all? Well, thanks for your patience.
Thank you very much, Dennis.